Okay, so let's say that you would like to uh, automatically, randomly pan a sound uh, between four different channels or two different channels. Um, One option is to use the Pan4s or the Pan2s object, and you can control the path of the Pan4s and the Pan2s objects with the line object. So the line object takes a message that includes a starting location, which can be 0, it doesn't have to be 0, um, a destination, in this case 1, and then a duration, 2000 milliseconds or 2 milliseconds. And then after that, you could put a new destination back to 0 and a new duration. So what you see here is a uh, dynamically, randomly generated list of values of destinations, well, starting locations, destinations, and durations that I generated with uh, this patch that I made. And so what you can see, the way this patch works is you can either input a sound file and it will find its duration. I'll do that, show you that in a second, or you can just make a random duration, say it's a 10-second file. And then you can say, you can choose the number of breaks you want. And the number of breaks, what I mean by that is just basically each of these lines, each of these different directions you have, you can think of as a break. So it's 1, 2, 3. If I were to do 4, generate, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And so what this patch is doing is just choosing a series of random destinations, including a sort of starting destination, and then it's taking the overall duration and basically dividing up different percentages of that overall duration and using that as the amount of time to get to these various destination points. So it's a fairly simple patch. I'll show you under the hood now. We can ignore this because it's not related to the functioning of the overall patch. It just has to do with the patch chords. If you use this in a bigger context. And basically how this works, you have an Uzi here, and when you choose a number of breaks, that basically goes to a few places. It tells you how many times to choose a random value between up to 100, between 0 and 100 or 1 and 100. And it also tells you to group those values together. And it's also telling you to group the same number of destination values together. And over here, it's a sort of different part of the patch, which we'll get to in a second. So basically, you have a number of breaks that you're sending to all these different places. And let's just focus over here for a second. Basically, what you do, you get all these different values between 1 and 100, and you send those two places. First, you group them together and you send them to be added together so that you can basically figure out what the total value that you just generated is, and you put that into one side of this equation. And then you send each of the values as a list to be divided by that overall sum. And so that's how you're getting your percentages here. So this is the percentage of the total duration of the sound file. So then the next step, as you can imagine, is to multiply that these percentages by the total duration. So here's the total duration of the sound file, and here's the list of values that are percentages of that duration that you've just generated. So that's one part of your list already all done. Over here, you'll recall we need not only durations, but we also need a destination. So here we're choosing the destinations, and the destinations can be values between -1 and 1. So we randomly choose whether it's going to be negative or positive, and then we choose a value between 1 and 100 randomly, and then we scale that down so that we have a value between either -1 or +1. Those are all the destinations. So then we're going to lace these two different sets of values together here to generate this overall list. Now you'll notice this list is still missing one aspect. If you remember the line help file, we need a starting place followed by a comma. So that's what's generated over here is the starting place. Again, it can be negative or positive. And then it's just, the syntax is just formatted so that it's correct, and then you get this whole overall list, which is what you ultimately see here when we generate the file. You'll notice there's a whole lot of other stuff on this side of the patch. Basically, all that's doing is formatting this list over here so that you can view it in this function a little bit more reasonably.